Happy holidays, folks. Boy, do I need this. You know, when perusing a toy aisle as a kid, sometimes the tipping point between getting one figure or another was the packaging. More accurately, the artwork that complemented the action figure or the toy inside. Sometimes expansive and realistic, other times minimalistic and simple. The most compelling artwork was my favorite, and usually persuaded me to part with my cash. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen experience, the extinct packaging art that inspired us to buy. The graphics to help sell the product, spark our imagination, and win that toy a spot on our Christmas wish lists. Let's revisit the best, and some others, that grace the box or blister cards of our favorite franchises with the artwork of Persuasion. Who can forget M.A.S.K, the Kenner toy line and corresponding cartoon with the most rockin' 80s animated theme song ever? M.A.S.K, not to be confused with M.A.S.K, debuted in 1985, and they came in boxes adorned with two very distinct images of the toy. One on the front and one on the back. Yeah, there were some little ones on the sides too, but it was these that were the most important. On the back was more like a photo of the toy and its features, while the front? Oh, that's where the action was at. The original artwork looked as though it would drive or fly right off the package. The vehicles, which could modify into a second mode, like Transformers, were shown with the driver, a character of either the heroic M.A.S.K team or villainous Venom, each with a distinct and specialized skill, kinda like G.I. Joe. I don't think this was an accident, and Kenner took some of the best from both Mattel and Hasbro to create this uniquely original idea. The art caught a thrilling moment of adventure that conveyed what you could do with the toy, if only you bought it. Some were more vibrant than others, but there was a sense of realism that made us kids believe the promise of the imagery, convincing us all to take it home with us. The character art of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, is what I considered realistic, especially as a kid. They were illustrations of real people, anatomically correct, and with facial expressions that weren't toyetic, but sincere emotion from men and women in battle. The flames behind them made it all the more exciting as those colors read thrilling. Many people may not find much in common between the 3 3/4 inch figure and their predecessor, the original G.I. Joe action figure or Action Man. But when paying attention to the art for Action Sailor, Action Paratrooper, and so on, you can see the realistic detail of the soldier is quite the inspiration for the more modern version. The original G.I. Joe illustration feels true to life for any one of our fighting men and harkens back to posters from a wartime era and propaganda that persuaded civilians to enlist. The artwork for your action figure was also enticing, and A Real American Hero followed the same spirit, only adding that incredible background like they were each emerging from the final explosion, in slow motion of course, persuading our little minds that these were the toys we were looking for. Almost immediately before the modern G.I. Joe line was released, Eagle Force put their best foot forward with even smaller die-cast action figures. Eagle Force and its mercenaries and baddies had blister card art as well. Perhaps they too were inspired by the original G.I. Joe. The bright and sometimes buffoonish characters were depicted in the middle of some action that was more bonkers and comic in nature than serious military power. As if part of a conspiracy, Eagle Force vanished as G.I. Joe took more space on the toy shelf. That space was needed for huge boxes of G.I. Joe branded toys that continued delivering top-notch box art with detailed paintings of vehicles, playsets, always in the midst of some urgent mission or battle. Which one of these was your favorite? Covered in various graphics of the characters, both in robot and in alternate mode, the Transformers box did not fail to engage our senses with massive world building and action illustrations that clearly took artistic license. Along with photos of the figures and successive steps of transformation, the real masterpiece of the Transformers G1 packaging were the different box art pieces on the back of each new wave of figures. Well, the larger figures at least. Often revealing new characters in an interstellar clash, some seen in mid-transformation. Laser blasts and explosions littered the landscape of a rich cosmic background on which the Transformers narrative could play out. The new and classic robots in this mural-type art tried hard to keep their designs true to the actual toy articulation. However, there was also the individual character art. Usually on the front, near the window that you could see the toy in vehicle or alt mode, this graphic remained rooted in the actual toy aesthetic. but with some exaggerated poses impossible for the figure itself, but used to convey the energy you're supposed to feel and how the character might actually look in action, if they had any articulation to speak of, which most of them didn't. It may have been slightly false advertising, but it did increase our sense of awe in the characters we were trying to decide to get or not. At least Transformers tried to make the artwork engaging and their characters exciting. They weren't the only converting robots in town, but the GoBots packaging was very true to the figure inside. But that left the artwork a bit lackluster. Hitting the accuracy hard, the oversized colored drawings of the character was true to form, including the limited articulation, with no additional story elements introduced in the picture. The on-the-nose named robots like Drillhead, Fightor, or Cykill were simply duplicated in large size for the blister card of the figure you were getting, if you hadn't already chosen to go to the other side and buy a Transformer instead. They weren't exactly marketed to me, and I never bought a Jem doll, but the artwork was so intriguing. It conveyed an ideal moment in the 80s timeline with an aesthetic of promise. Dynamic and vibrant, the high-class, detailed fashion illustrations of the characters done by Sharon Nettle is undeniably impeccable, tangible. Now, I've already discussed the comparison of toy art with the product inside in another show. Yikes, you better check that one out. This, however, is about the gorgeous toy packaging artwork, and there is no denying each of Nettle's drawings of the characters portray their personality, coming out in realistic representation. Even if the world building was limited to bold graphic design elements in the form of palm trees or some buildings, the drawings of the characters deserve a top spot just out of respect. Like Jem in '85, the blister cards of this 1987 action figure line, that would have continued if only released a few years earlier, are decorated with artwork that may not include tons of extra world building, but the character illustration gives a lot away. The holograms, both from their chest and their staffs, hint at a world that we can only dream about. Holograms were hot, and if Jem was about holograms, the Visionaries were holograms, for real. This boy's toy of articulated heroes and villains who use the power of their holographic spirit animal in battle should have done gangbusters with their cartoon counterpart. Maybe just too late to the game, but the artwork is memorable and does drive home some additional story elements within its moody but detailed figures in motion. Just after my original playtime, when I had to put my toys away, at least for a number of years, I still paid attention to the toy aisles and the commercials. Visionaries were a toy line I would have loved to collect, but that was out of the question at the time. Kids of the late 80s did have some great choices, although many didn't have the same staying power like those that came before. Air Raiders is not exactly iconic, but well loved by kids who had them, and came complete with some stunning artwork on their packaging. Hasbro took inspiration from Kenner's M.A.S.K, and why not? They both had those smaller, under 3-inch figures. The blister cards and boxes had full-blown masterpieces of epic battles over rough terrain, showcasing the use of air for both the characters and their vehicles. Carded figures highlighted the characters, who were sadly all very generic suited figures with few differing features, and the boxes showed detailed vehicles and their gimmicks over an intense backdrop of turmoil playing out. The rich painting does evoke extreme adventure, an action-packed play for kids dreaming of what this toy line was all about. The figures may have been relatively unmemorable, but the art did excite the imagination. If immersive world building drew you in, the original Masters of the Universe box art delivered. Breathtaking images to introduce you to the figures and the playsets, the impressive illustrations enveloped you, transporting you to the raw, dangerous, and often barren landscape of the planet Eternia. Motu art captured not only the characters in motion, but in perpetual action, translating the struggle of good and evil against settings that filled in the story. Complete landscapes that showed you who these characters were, where they came from, and what life was like. Definitely influenced by the sword and sorcery fantasy genre and Frank Frazetta, artists like Rudy Obero, William Garland, and William George produced the most famous artwork in toydom. Masters wins with dark fantasy and implied peril if not harsh existence. The scenes bathed in deep muted browns and greens. Only pops of color told us stories we wanted to be part of. And as Frazetta and Conan were not complete strangers, the artwork was familiar and enticing. There were lush forests, even beautiful fields, and kingdoms in Eternia, But disregarding the bright color saturation in Filmation's cartoon, Attorney of the Toys was far less forgiving and much more interesting. Certainly related, the artwork of Princess of Power Toyline didn't disregard its sibling connection to Motu, especially on the boxes for the steeds and the playsets. Whether Arrow, Claudine, the Sea Harp, or Crystal Castle, the pieces of art were saturated in vivid hues and colorful swaths of light instead of darkness. The pink tones were of course ever present, firmly placing it in the girls' toy aisles, but the settings and character models weren't completely removed from He-Man's. The lively and airy look, along with the cast of female warriors, did remove the more barbarian elements, but seamlessly replaced them with what I can only describe as a hint of Greco-Roman inspiration. This of course would lend itself more seamlessly with Etheria of the Filmation cartoon of She-Ra, Princess of Power. Settings in cheery forests and charming and open colorful backgrounds, the toy line did showcase beautiful graphics. That is until the back of the blister card. As with Motu, Pop had a similar image for the front of the card art. This time it was the full and familiar representation of She-Ra aboard Swiftwind, not unlike the one piece of art for Golden Girl. No matter what character you were purchasing, the same art accompanied it. However, where He-Man's allies and enemies were elevated by individual artwork in rough-drawn action vignettes on the back, Series 1 of Princess of Power provided a full body and a close-up of the character's face very true to the action figure. Not a picture, but an illustration in what looked to be something more at home in a fashion magazine. Barbie she was not, but She-Ra still had rooted hair and fashion accessories, so it kind of made sense. How many of you, like me, persuaded your begrudging mom to buy you She-Ra because she was He-Man's sister? There were toy lines who simply slapped the same artwork onto each and every package. One design to rule them all, if you will. Nothing more than either a flat illustration of the main character, like Black Star or Rainbow Bright, or a consistent design of the box with only a name change for who was inside, like Strawberry Shortcake and Supernaturals. These toys didn't go the extra mile when it came to original pieces of art, and believe me, in Thundercats' case, it might have helped. Plenty of other franchises included packaging artwork to persuade you to buy. More often than not, they were basic line drawings that didn't provide any real story building, lore expansion, or added any interest. Dynamic images were rare. Some of these went as far as to just replicate the action figure in all its limited articulated glory, and that looks just goofy. But I do want to give credit where credit is due. There were some diverse lines, both well-known and unfamiliar, that included some well-made graphics that deserve a special mention, as I feel they had artwork of Persuasion. The Infaceables, a short-lived toy line that had a good idea on paper, but less than reliable in reality. The action figure split two nice large pictures, one of the before and one of the face after you've sucked all the air out. Then there's Cops and Crooks. Okay, just illustrations of the character inside, but this time with some real detail, with some action poses, with some energy that might have you leaning towards buying one of these. I don't want to leave out Fisher-Price Adventure People. On much of the carded figures, there were some beautiful pieces of artwork, but they kept it real by showcasing the figure or the character as close to the toy as possible, but they still managed to keep them compelling. And then there's the Micronauts. They were hit or miss, sometimes getting very surreal and powerful imagery, other times weaker attempts to be mysterious. Either way, the possibilities seemed endless when looking at the art on these incredible action figures. Expansive and rich in color and storytelling, or minimalistic graphics that confirmed what exactly you were going to get. The more fascinating the artwork, the better chances I was going to buy. What did you think about toy packaging illustrations and the art of persuasion? Was it ever a factor for what toy line you longed for, loved, or collected? The Gen experience was a wonderful time to grow up, as it was impressive artwork like this that sold us on the toys we wanted, or convinced us we wanted them. I certainly hope this was worth a like and subscribe from you. What are your thoughts on toy packaging art, and which were your favorites? Let us all know in the comments, and I hope that you'll come back soon. Thanks for watching, and until next time.